Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Radio Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk radio. Be advised that the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Yes, my friends, conservative, not bitter indeed. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Email, by the way, if you want to be part of the conversation, you want to share your thoughts, questions, feedback, all that stuff, todd@toddhuffshow.com, or you can text 317-210-2830. I want to talk about it. There's a lot on the agenda today. I do want to start with the court ruling last night that stops the Trump tariffs. I want to talk about that. There's a whole bunch of things in the news that I want to get to, but I want to start here, and I want to get to other things. I want to get to Elon Musk's comments. He's now going to be stepping away from Doge. He's not very happy about the big, beautiful bill. Trump responded to that. Trump was called out by the media based upon some comments by the Wall Street Journal where they, TACO was the acronym. Trump chickens, I forget what the A stood for, but basically Trump chickens out on the tariffs is what the Wall Street Journal is saying. Trump's talking about that. Anyway, lots to get to is the point. As usual, friends, before we get too far down that path, let me ask you this. Are you tired of the money you work hard for to be used to support ideas, to support candidates, to support causes that are in direct opposition to what you support each and every day? That's why we started Freedom Marketplace. It is a free, searchable directory of businesses who share your conservative principles, conservative values. There's no concern about doing business with these folks and then having that money that you gave them, your hard-earned money for their products and services. There's no worry about that then being used to further a political ideology, a political party, candidates, whatever political movement of the day, the issue of the day might be, the soup du jour. No worry about that money being used to support causes with which you vehemently disagree, my friends. They've signed a pledge not to support leftist candidates or leftist causes. They push in the same direction you are. They love this country. America first. They love this country. They may not agree with every political thing that we talk about on this show, but that's all right. We just don't want people who are pushing for an America that is fundamentally different, that stands in opposition to liberty and the founding principles that we have in this great land. And that's what you'll find on Freedom Marketplace. People who are on board with those general concepts. Check it out. It's free for you to use. freedommarketplace.net. Again, freedommarketplace.net. Liberty and business for all, my friends. All right, let's start here. Federal court, this is ABC News, so take from that whatever you will. Trump administration asks for delay in court ruling blocking his global tariffs. The court said Trump doesn't have the power to unilaterally impose some tariffs. Written by a team of... I never understood, why do we need a team of 3 journalists to write this story? Catherine Falders, Peter... I don't even know what that last name... Charlamabo? I guess, I don't know. Stephen Portnoy. They got a tag team to write an article that takes 6 minutes to read. Regardless, I'm going to read part of it. The Trump administration is urging the New York-based Court of International Trade to delay its order blocking President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs, warning that enforcement of the ruling will cause a, quote, foreign policy disaster scenario. In an opinion on Wednesday, that would have been yesterday, the 3-judge panel struck down Trump's global tariffs as, quote, contrary to law. Now, let me pause here. There will be people, you've probably already seen them. You may be seeing them at the office today. You may live with someone who's going to be in this camp. You may have a neighbor like this. You may, whatever, work with them, see them at, some community function, business function, family function. They live in your community, whatever. You're going to find someone who's going to say, look, this is proof that Trump is trying to destroy our democracy, overrule the long-established law and order constitution of this great nation. He's a dictator. I told you all along. Pause everything. This absolutely happens in any administration. Courts will rule against something that any administration has done. This happened under Biden. Remember, Biden kept trying to find ways around the court's ruling that he couldn't unilaterally just forgive student loan debt. And he continued to look for ways. In fact, he was encouraged. He was encouraged by people like AOC. From what I recall, I think she was one of the front runners with this message to basically, I don't know if she said ignore the court, but that was kind of at the core of the message. Just do it, man. Just do it and move on. What are they going to do about it? Sort of mentality. So it's not uncommon. Now, for people who haven't paid attention to politics, in today's world, this is one of the things wrong, one of the many things wrong with the world in which we live. You have people who haven't paid any attention to politics other than what they see someone post on their Facebook, somewhere on Facebook. Or, they might not have paid attention in civics class or government class. I don't even know if this is required anymore or expected. But they knew nothing about politics until they were worked into a frenzy by the media to hate Trump. And they have no frame of reference. Listen, everybody should be able to voice their opinion, but not all opinions should be viewed by the individual as equal. I don't take all opinions the same. Everybody should be able to express it. You should be able to make your case. Sometimes some of the best cases can be made by the people who are least likely to be experts. In fact, I saw some things on social media. I'm a Pacers fan. By the way, Game 5 tonight. Pacers can put the Knicks out of the playoffs and advance to the finals tonight. I'm not predicting it. I'm hopeful for it. We're going back to Madison Square Garden. It's going to be an intense environment. If you don't watch these games, I encourage you to check these games out. These games are absolutely a blast for me. It's intense. The Knicks hate the Pacers. The Pacers hate the Knicks. It's Hicks versus Knicks, all that sort of stuff. They criticize us here in flyover country. In fact, I saw yesterday a video of some girl in New York saying, you guys basically might have beaten us at basketball, but we're beating you at everything else. And I don't know how people in New York, I've been to the city once in my life. I was blown away by it as a guy that used to live on a 200-acre farm and live, grew up in semi-rural part of the state anyway. It's an incredible thing to see. I didn't think I would really be a fan of the city. I would never, you never want to say never, but I have no interest in living there. Fine if you do want to live there. I understand people like that lifestyle or all the things that there are to do, and there's so much energy, and it's a really amazing place in a lot of ways. But it's also, in other ways, no more special than the place that I live. There's more people and all that, but it's just amazing to me how some people think in order for them to, I guess, have success in life, they got to put somebody else down. I'm glad the lady in New York was happy that she lives in New York. I don't know why her happiness is contingent upon me believing that she's beaten me in life because she lives in New York City. Not the way I look at it at all. In fact, The happiest people don't need to put people down at all. They live in their own lane. They don't need to, they don't need other people to see them as anything. They just live their lives, do what's important to them, and move on with things. But there's this mentality out there where everybody wants to have something to say. Everybody wants to be seen as someone who has some sort of insight, and I get it, right? This is something, there's nothing wrong with feeling like you're contributing and all of that. But instead of focusing on demanding that you be acknowledged for contributing, spend the time figuring out how to bring real value to the conversation. And there's so much attention paid to this, and people, there's little true humility out there, or people say, I just don't know. Now, I'm going to tell you today, I'm going to get to a point in this conversation on the tariffs where I'm going to say to you, I don't know. I don't know. And folks, this is part of what it means to be an American. This is part of what it means to have three separate but equal branches. One branch may say, this is how this should be interpreted. This is what I think I can do. This is, in the executive branch, for example, this is what we're doing. This is how we're interpreting it. The court could intervene, or a court could intervene and say, it's not how we see it. And this is the way that it's supposed to work. Now, I'm not saying this particular decision should have been made, but I am saying that there are checks and balances. And just because a president has been overruled in this particular instance, at least temporarily, by a court, it doesn't mean that he's some anti-constitutionalist. Some of these matters, some of these issues are very, very complicated, and there are certainly more than one way of looking at things. In fact, how many times have we seen Supreme Court decisions that are 5-4 or 6-3? We just saw a Supreme Court case recently because Amy Coney Barrett recused herself from the case. It was a 4-4 tie. So, these things, my friends, they're complicated, and it's not uncommon for a court to rule against an administration or to basically step in and say that this action taken by another branch isn't allowed by the Constitution or by law or whatever. All right, going back to this article then. The president's assertion, this is what the judges wrote, the president's assertion of tariff-making authority in the instant case, unbounded as it is by any limitation in duration or scope, exceeds, this is the point here, exceeds any tariff authority delegated to the president under IEEPA. We'll get to what that is here in a moment. They continue, the worldwide and retaliatory tariffs are thus ultra-vires and contrary to law, the judges wrote. According to the judges, Congress, not the president, has the authority to impose tariffs under most circumstances, and Trump's tariffs do not meet the limited condition of a, quote, unusual and extraordinary threat that would allow him to act alone. The Department of Justice on Thursday requested a stay on this decision, saying it's needed to, quote, avoid immediate irreparable harm to United States foreign policy and national security. I'll look during the break and see if there's been any news on that, but as it stands right now, that's all I know is they've requested the stay. They say, look, if these tariffs are going to be removed, if they're going to be taken down immediately, let's put a pause on this until we can go through the appeals process to make sure that this is the correct decision, because if these are taken away and if we have to act on this immediately and abide by the judge's ruling, then there's going to be irreparable harm to the United States, our foreign policy, our national security because of this. So, lawyers for the the Department of Justice said this: it is critical for the country's national security and the president's conduct of ongoing delicate diplomatic efforts that the court stay its judgment. The harm of the conduct of foreign affairs from the relief ordered by the court could not be greater. So, Trump said, let's just do a quick little snapshot summary here. Trump has used executive authority given to him by Congress through this IEEPA piece of legislation, which we'll get into and talk more about. He says that I'm declaring an emergency and we are going to have tariffs, worldwide retaliatory tariffs. This has gone into the court system. The federal, a panel of 3 judges ruled last night, that the president doesn't have the authority to do this. The Constitution gives the power to levy tariffs to Congress, not to the President of the United States, which is accurate. However, let's talk about this IEEPA. This is a piece of legislation that was passed here. Well, don't know where it is here. Where did it go? Let me pull it up over here. All right, so I have this ready to go here. Just looking in the wrong place. Where'd you go? All right, here we go. So the IEEPA, that is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Okay, so there are examples of things in the Constitution that are granted and given to the authority of Congress. There have been occasions where Congress has passed laws to say we are going to allow the president under certain circumstances to act in these particular areas, which are clearly given to us by the Constitution, but for the sake of efficiency or whatever, quick decision-making, whatever the rationale, we're giving up some of our authority here and passing it on to the President of the United States if these certain criteria are met. That's what this particular act did, and it was passed in 1977, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. It's a federal law that gave the president authority to regulate international commerce in response to unusual and extraordinary threats to national security, foreign policy, or the U.S. economy. Now, pause all of that. So you have to have certain criteria that are met. The president just can't wake up according to the law that Congress had written. Now, it's vague, as many of these things are, and then courts have to get involved and make sense of it. But it's vague, and it's designed to say, look, if there's an instance where you're dealing with a national security threat, you're dealing with something that's pertinent to our foreign policy and your ability to engage in foreign policy effectively, or if this is something that is highly unusual and some sort of a threat to our economy, then if you check off any of those boxes, then you can do things like enact tariffs. The act was created to provide a more structured framework for addressing peacetime threats, replacing certain provisions of the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917. So that's kind of the background and history. That's kind of the synopsis, the analysis of kind of the framework of this debate, this discussion. So, historically, the IEEPA basically came from a effort in the 1970s to reform things legislatively that pertain to presidential powers under that what's called the TWEA, Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917. So, during the Cold War, it was discovered that the U.S. had been in continuous state of emergency for over 40 years, prompting Congress to establish more defined criteria and limitations on emergency powers. So they're trying to balance this out, right? So they want the executive branch to be able to act without constantly seeking congressional approval on things that were technically under the purview and responsibility of Congress in the Constitution. So they said, look, we'll allow you to act within this window. So the president, the executive branch, is trying to operate within that framework while at the same time not getting a blank check to just basically take over Congress's responsibility. It would be, I guess, akin to the president being a commander-in-chief of our armed forces, but he doesn't have the power to declare war, right? And then you have all this gamesmanship over when something is a conflict, when it should be declared war. I mean, there's been many examples where Congress never declared war, and we were engaged in what was, for all intents and purposes, a war. I mean, you can call it whatever you want, but the president has to be able to act quickly and protect our nation and our national security interests, our allies around the world, without seeking congressional approval, while at the same time not having broad discretion just to march in and cause World War III somewhere. It's a similar sort of thing here. So Congress wanted the president to be able to have some authority to deal with these things that rose to a certain level of threat. So now the question becomes, does the way that our economy, does the situation pertaining to our overall economy and how things are working, on an international trade basis, and just how the United States has been harmed over the course of many decades because of bad trade policies, because of a foreign adversary like China becoming more and more powerful, using their economy, of course, to do a lot of things, between build their military on the one hand and basically steal from U.S. companies or other folks, and then basically sell their products illegally or violate patents. All that stuff is happening, and the question is, when does it become an emergency? I think you could certainly make the case, in the case of situation with China, that this is a foreign adversary who is a direct threat to the United States. The more its economy grows, the more that there is unbalanced and unfair trade, the more that there are penalties for our folks to have to pay tariffs to import to China, but yet to not have that be reciprocated can certainly be construed to paint a scenario that is at least very concerning, and potentially something that is enough of a concern to warrant the president taking action. The question is, again, where do we draw the line? I've got to draw the line right here as I've glanced down at the clock and see that I have mere seconds remaining in this segment, my friends. So, that being said, I'm going to stop talking, take a quick time out. We'll pick up on the other side of the break. When we get back, you're listening to Conservative, Not Bitter Talk. I'm your host, Todd Huff. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Just going through this court decision to basically say Trump's tariffs are unconstitutional, illegal, as they have currently ruled. Trump's team is trying to get a stay on that decision. I did not check that during the break. I told you I was going to. I'm going to do that next break. As of right now, I don't know if anything has happened with that. Trump's team is saying, look, we're in the middle of trying to get our way out of this problem, a problem that's caused real impact on the American economy, the American taxpayer, the American family. We are bearing the cost of many things around the world that is harming our citizens in a serious and long-term way. And we're trying to fix it and at least put a pause on your ruling taking effect, because if you don't, it's going to cause irreparable harm. We've walked through the fire here. We've walked through the difficult parts. We're actually seeing some headway being made. If you take this leveraging tool away from the president, we're going to get right back into this situation. That's the argument of the Trump administration. By the way, one with which I agree. Okay, let's go back to this IEEPA. Let's look at this specifically here. It says this: to activate IEEP hours, the president must declare a national emergency to address threats originating substantially outside the United States. President Trump did that. Number 2, once declared, the president can regulate or prohibit financial transactions, freeze access, impose economic sanctions, block transactions with foreign entities. Trump has imposed some level of a sanction, a tariff. He's imposing economic conditions on these countries under the power of this piece of legislation. Now, there's examples of when this has been used in the past. Carter used this in 1979. That was the first time when he froze the Iranian assets during the hostage crisis. The hostage crisis, by the way, that ended when Ronald Reagan walked into office. Bush used this in 2001 to block the terrorists from getting access to their assets post 9/11. Obama used this in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea. He had sanctions imposed on Russia. Trump used these during his term as president, his first term, dealing with trade policies and the regulation of Chinese apps during his first term. Biden used this to implement sanctions against Russia following their invasion of Ukraine, which again happened on Biden's watch and not on Trump's. All right, so the question is, where is the line? That's what this all comes down to. Trump didn't just dream this up. This law exists. This ability for the president to act exists. It's not like he said, I'm just going to make up a new power that I have. This is here. This is here. I think it applies. The court says it doesn't. So, by enabling the president to use executive action, it allows things to happen more quickly. It gives the president, in this case, President Trump, the ability to be flexible in dealing with some of these threats that we face economically, which, by the way, can certainly lead to increased military tensions as well if there's a one-sided situation with trade that's funding, in large part, the Chinese government and their military presence and the threats that they impose. I mean, China is a real threat. China is somebody that we had better be paying close attention to. China builds islands in the South China Sea, I think it is, because of the territory. I don't know the official name, or it's escaping me at the moment. The way that territorial waters works. A country basically has the rights to water, say, in the ocean, within a certain distance from its shoreline. That's not international waters. And so in theory, what China is doing is they're blocking these trade paths, this important part of, this important stretch of international waters. They're basically trying to stop that from being international waters. They're building these islands. And if you build these islands close enough together, you can basically say, now we control all this territorial water because now it's China's water because it's within a certain distance of the shoreline of these man-made islands. And then you've got that threat with Taiwan, which is, of course, another situation, the Hong Kong situation. I mean, China is an existential threat. There's no doubt about that. And so the question is, does having policies in place that basically hurt the U.S. government, the U.S. taxpayer, our businesses, our GDP, our economy, if having policies in place that hurts us and helps a country like China dramatically, and to the point to where it's causing real havoc for American families, American businesses, at some point you would have to say this would certainly rise to the level of a threat. The question is this the level? That's what the argument is about. So, there's obviously concerns. I mean, it's understandable why the president would want to do this. It's understandable why Congress would say, okay, in this situation, we give you the authority to act. Now, but there's also risks with this, right? There's the possibility that there's executive overreach. There is a very vague understanding, a vague definition in the legislation about what constitutes an unusual and extraordinary threat. And that's very subjective. What is unusual? What is extraordinary? How do we quantify those things? There's no such way to measure things, especially when we have a bunch of knuckleheads in our government that can't even tell you what things like recession means or what a woman is. There's also questions about the scope of the overall authority and how this particularly would apply to things like tariffs. There's lots of questions here, but what's important to understand is that this can certainly, if we're objective, can certainly be argued to a point to where we can at least see the rationale and the reasoning for what Trump is doing. Now, likewise, we can see, at least in theory, why a court would say this is out of bounds. Listen, I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm going to tell you, earlier in the program I said, there's going to be a point today when I say, I don't know. And I'm telling you, I don't know. I can see the rationale for how we got here. I understand as an American who has watched this country basically be taken advantage of, watch this country be put into a position where her economy has been exploited by the rest of the world and hampered by the way that other countries have been treating us. I can certainly see and absolutely understand that it is of our greatest interest to have the best economy in the world. It's in our best interest. I mean, the biggest economy in the world means that we've been able to build the greatest military in the world. Those things are connected. And so America having the best military in the world is obviously necessary for having limited threats, right? To deal with any threats. That's kind of the great equalizer. We've got these U.S. aircraft carrier groups that can be basically anywhere in the world. I mean, we could be anywhere in the world with the most sophisticated equipment, the best fighting force, the world's largest and second largest air forces in our U.S. Air Force and in our U.S. Navy. Those things provide security, and at some point, not having that, especially when you look at some of these nefarious characters and actors on the international stage, that's an obvious threat if we can't repel or stop threats coming from some of these folks around the world. So these things are connected. The question is, again, where is the line? Again, I'm getting near the line of this segment. Friends, we have started on this program another division, something that I had done in the past. It's called Red, White, and Brand. I've shared this with you before. We're now open for business, providing products and services for folks, putting their logo on almost anything. That can be apparel, promotional products, that can be signage, that can be awards. Friends, it's virtually whatever you can imagine. Your logo on almost anything with Red, White, and Brand. If you text my name Todd, to 317-210-2830, you'll get a 10% discount, and we'll reach out to you to help you find what you need on your next branded purchase. Red, White, and Brand. I'll give you the website here soon. It's up. I just got to finalize a few things. But anyway, 317-210-2830. Text Todd to that. We'll give you a 10% discount and get you what you need. Quick time out, though, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Oz reminded me, every once in a while she stays awake during the I'm kidding. She better stay awake. She said, weren't you going to look something up in the break? I was. She reminded me. I told you I would. There's so many things running through my head as I move from segment to segment, but I did say I was going to look. I still don't see if there's been a response. I don't expect this immediate of a response, but I think Trump's team was given, I want to say, 10 days to basically follow the court's order about these tariffs. So there's a little bit of a time window. The administration has asked for a stay, basically meaning, hey, let's pause this because we got to get through the appeals process. Let's not cause irreparable harm to what Trump has been trying to do here. So I did find another article, though, CNBC.com, 4 tools at the Trump administration's disposal after a U.S. court blocks tariffs. In fact, the link I clicked on at CNBC, or the link that they posted that you find if you Google it, it says Trump expected to find a workaround after trade court, and it has an ellipses after that. But basically, the article is saying Trump's expected to find some way to work around this. I'm not predicting that. This is now beyond when I told you earlier. There's going to come a part in this conversation today, a point in this conversation, where I say to you, I don't know. That's where we are. This is now, the lawyers are getting involved looking for ways that Trump can continue to do these negotiations to try to fix our trade deals, to try to fix our economic health, which is what he's been doing. CNBC says that he has 4 particular things he can do to basically try to work around this. So, that's that. I'm looking here to see. It's just not. I'd have to read through all this, but I just saw this a moment ago. So the bottom line. Well, I guess there's. Here's the point that is relevant. Section 122 of U.S. trade laws, the Trade Act of 1974. Does not require a formal investigation and could therefore be one of the swiftest ways to get around the court roadblock. The administration could quickly replace the 10% across-the-board tariff with a similar tariff up to 15% under Section 122. That's what analysts at Goldman Sachs have said. Section 232 tariffs, which are already in place for steel, aluminum, and auto imports, could also be broadened to other sectors. This trade law allows the president to take action against threats to national security. Section 338, meanwhile, allows the president to impose levies of up to 50% on imports from countries that discriminate against the U.S. So that's what those are some possible workarounds. And I was incorrect. This is no, I'm right. Goldman Sachs economists at Goldman Sachs are the ones who are pointing this out. So I'm just telling you that's what's out there, but it's caused problems. And let's put all that aside. We got a legal thing that we're working through here. But what's ultimately happening here? The United States is Trump in particular, is trying to fix decades-long problems that are affecting our overall economy. And I don't think that there's any doubt about this. The trade imbalances, the way that our country has been treated or taken advantage of by other countries, even folks that are our friends. And listen, I don't fault them for saying, hey, we just negotiated a really good deal. The idiots in the United States signed on to it. I don't fault them. I don't fault them for trying to get what's best for their country. But to Trump's point, the era of the United States carrying the financial burden of all these things around the world is over. The American people are suffering. Yes, we have a prosperous economy. Yes, we have, materially speaking, a tremendous amount of blessing in this country. But we also have a tremendous amount of obligation. We've had high taxes. Trump is trying to address this. We've had bureaucratic messes, a huge bloated government. That'll lead me to Elon Musk and Doge, which we'll get to after in the next hour. all these things, my friends, there's reasons why all these things are kind of intersecting and we're bouncing between topics because they're all interrelated. This country has been mismanaged for a long time. The United States has carried way too much of the world's responsibility, whether that means financially, whether that means militarily. I mean, we carry a tremendous amount of the burden. Trump's not saying we shouldn't lead the way. Trump's not saying we shouldn't carry even more than other folks. Trump's simply saying that the level at which this has been happening, regardless of the issue, around the world is coming to an end. It's hurting American families. And with things coming down the road and changes to the economy and the impact of AI and all this uncertainty and all these questions, this stuff needs to be addressed. The national debt, the size and scope of government, what Doge has uncovered, all of that stuff, my friends. I got to stop this hour, though. I will see you on the other side of the hour. SDG.